Hello everybody, how are you guys doing? Hope everything is fine. This is Spanish Grandmaster Pepe Cuenca, and it is a big pleasure to be here once again with all of you guys. And as you know, in about a month, the World Chess Championship will start in Dubai, where the current champion, Magnus will be facing Jan Nepomniachtchi, the candidate, Russian player, in a match of 14 games. It's been almost 3 years without a World Chess Championship, right? Due to the coronavirus pandemic. And, we all have great expectations on this match, and we are so much looking forward to it, right? So it's always interesting to see what happened between them before the match. And I'm going to be bringing you some of their best games in the last years. We have to say that Nepomniachtchi is one of the few players that has a positive score versus the champion. And of course, we are talking here about classical games all the time. And the game I'm bringing you today happened in Croatia in 2019 in Zagreb. And it is the last decided game between them. So let's fasten our seatbelts and let's enjoy all together this fantastic game between Nepo with the white pieces and Carlsen with the black pieces. So Nepo went for e4 and Magnus replies with c5, going for the Sicilian. If you guys remember, the Sicilian was Magnus's main weapon in the World Chess Championship against Fabi Caruana. So knight f3 for Nepo, knight c6. And now the main line is of course d4, entering in the open Sicilian, and after cd, knight takes d4, knight f6, knight c3. After e5, we are entering in the Sveshnikov Sicilian. This is one of Magnus's main weapons and the one that he used against Fabiano Caruana in the World Championship. But here, move number 3, there are other options. You can go bishop g5, bishop b5, entering in the Rosolimo variation, or knight c3. This is what Nepomniachtchi played in this game. This is an anti-Sveshnikov, right? Now, black again has different alternatives. In this game, Magnus went for e5, which is the main line. Black is saying, you know what? You didn't want to go to d4. You want to be the smart guy in the class. So you're not going to play d4 anymore. Of course, this is the advantage of e5. But it has a drawback as well, and the drawback is that black has weakened the a2 g8 diagonal, right? Because black cannot place a pawn on e6 anymore, so that means a bishop on c4 is doing a great job, putting an eye already on the f7 pawn. And this is what Nepo played in this game, bishop c4. Here there are different options. For black, the main line is bishop e7, controlling the g5 square. You cannot go knight f6 straight away because of knight g5. Now you see the problems of the s7 pawn. Actually, black is already losing in this position. So this is why bishop e7 is the main line here. But Magnus went for a secondary line, which is g6. Only 200 and something games in my database. And black's idea is to go bishop g7, knight g to e7, short castle, going for some sort of Botvinnik system with the black pieces, right? Okay, so very interesting move, g6. Now Nepo goes for d3, not only trying to develop this guy, but also, intending to go knight g5 in the next move. So black has to be very careful in this position. For example, if you continue developing with bishop g7, which is a very bad move, now knight g5 is actually very strong, because now there is a lot of pressure against f7, and knight h6 is forced. And you have many interesting plans. You can play f4, but you can play h4 and h5, and black is already in big trouble. So this is why after d3, Magnus went for h6, a good prophylactic move against knight g5. Now you control this square, you can relax at home, watch Netflix, and then you can continue developing pieces with bishop g7 and knight g to e7. And now Nepomniachtchi goes for a very aggressive move, which is h4. Wow! And probably at home you could be saying, come on Pepe, what is this move? Why doesn't go for short castle? This move is very interesting. White wants to push h5 and create more weaknesses along the light squares. So, and basically, black cannot stop that, sorry, because if black goes h5, then g5 square is once again weak and f7 is going to suffer. And if you try to play knight f6, you can even play h5 anyway, because if black takes this pawn on h5, you can play g4, and after knight f6, knight g5, and there is a pin along this file, and then f7 is once again suffering like a beast. So this is why you cannot stop h5, you have to live with that, and Magnus continued development with d6, reinforcing the center. Now this bishop could be developed at some point. So white goes with h5, and you know, the best option here for black is just to close the position with g5, and now I really like Nepomniachtchi idea, knight h2. So let's think a little bit about this position. So black has a lot of weaknesses on the light squares, as you can see here. So this bishop is doing a great job, you know, and d5 and f5 are very weak. So this is why knight h2 is a good move. The knight can be regrouped via f1 or g4, but the last goal is to go to e3. The knight on e3 is doing a great job covering d5, and that means that you know, black is never gonna be able to push d5, right? Because you know, we have so many pieces controlling that square. And also the knight on e3 is doing a great job covering f5, which is the other possible break for black in this position. And look at this bishop, you know, the bishop on f8 and later on g7 is a terrible piece. Not even the picks will take that bishop, you know. The bishop on g7, the pawn on e5 blocking this guy. And black dreams with, you know, opening up the position so this bishop can have a good life, but it's not going to be that easy. Alright, so Magnus continued with bishop g7, knight g4 from Nepomniachtchi, and knight g to e7. It's of course a very bad positional mistake to take this knight on g4, because you know, if we had few control on the light squares with the black pieces, now after giving up our light square bishop even less. So this is why taking on g4 is, you know, you deserve to go to prison if you take on g4. So this is why Magnus continued with knight g to e7 and knight e3. And now black goes for short castle. f5 is not a very good option here, because after takes, let's say short castle, you know, the king has to remain in the center, since, you know, this bishop is stopping black from going short castle. So this is not a good business for black here. So this is why Magnus goes for short castle. Now bishop d2 from Nepo and king h8. And with this move, Magnus is saying, of course I want to go f5 in the next move. And then if we manage to trade these 2 pawns, then d5 will be easier to play. And that means this bishop on g7 can dream of having a great life, you know, if we manage to open this diagonal for him. So there's only a good move in this position, and I'm sure you know already what move we're talking about, and this is g4. And this is what Nepomniachtchi played in this position, stopping the f5 reaction. The position is extremely interesting because, you know, all the pieces are remaining in the board. We didn't capture even a single pawn. So we need to, you know, talk a little bit about this position. So f5 is impossible to achieve. d5 is a weak square. f5 is a weak square. f4 is a weak square that black can use as well. And the king side is completely blocked. So that means that, you know, the game is going to happen on the queen side and on the center of the board. So black went for rook b8. So now Magnus shows his intentions of, you know, expanding his pawns on the queen side. One question is, should we, you know, chase this bishop on c4? Because we always said in chess 24 for so many years that the bishop pair, blah, blah, blah. Well, in this case, it's not a very good move, knight a5. For example, after a4, capturing on c4 only helps white because, you know, the knights are extremely great in close positions, right? The bishops are not so great here because the position is not open. And now an additional weakness, you know, appears in the position, the d6 pawn, which is a weak pawn. You know, white can put tremendous pressure on it, and basically black has no reaction. So this is why going for the bishop pair here is not a very good option. So rook b8 from Magnus Carlsen, and now Nepo says, you know what, you're gonna suffer to play b5 in this position. And now I really like Magnus's move, which is knight d4. It has multi-purpose. The first purpose is just to help the b5 break. So at some point, black is thinking of going a6 and b5. And then this knight can also be regrouped to e6 and f4, as you will see in the game. So Nepo goes for knight c to d5, knight takes d5, knight takes d5, and knight e6. And I really like this maneuver, you know, it's almost like a W, yeah? So knight d4, knight e6, knight f4. Once the knight is on f4, you know, it's annoying a little bit white's position, and any trade on f4 favors black. Why? Because, you know, after e takes f4, finally this bishop gets alive. So Nepo went for f3, reinforcing the position, so protecting the g4 pawn, and now knight f4 from Magnus Carlsen. And here, black is actually threatening something very interesting here, because if we do nothing, let's say rook g1, black's threat is to go bishop e6. And why is this a threat? Because black in the next move wants to capture on d5. Let's say I do something stupid, okay, like c3, then I take on d5, and we are forcing, at the end of the day, white to capture with the e pawn, and that means we are able to push f4, f5, and then in the future we are able to push e4, and suddenly black is much better, and the bishop on g7 has a life. So knight f4 has a deep idea, which is bishop e6. I really like Nepo's move. I mean, what happened in the game. He went for queen b1, which is a fantastic prophylactic move against bishop e6. Because after bishop e6, as has happened in the game, Nepo goes for queen a2. Finally, you know, protecting the knight on d5. So Nepo's idea, of course, if Magnus captures everything here, is of course to take with the queen at the end of the day. So this pawn remains on e4, and that means black cannot play f5, and that means this bishop is completely rubbish, right? So queen b1, a very deep idea from Nepomniachtchi, and Magnus goes for queen d7. Okay, Magnus connects the rook, and he's thinking about probably going for some b5 in the future. And with this move also, you know, you could think of sacrificing the bishop on g4, and this king is still naked in the center, so that's why Nepo says, you know what, I'm gonna forget about this sacrifice, I'm just gonna protect this pawn on g4 and then keep playing, which is very natural. So here, after rook g1, Magnus went for b6. How complex is this game, right? It's so interesting. There are so many plans, you know. They try on the king side, then the king side gets blocked. They try on the center, then nothing's going on in the center. Then they go for the queen side. Such a beautiful game. So Magnus goes for b6. And then, once again, at home, you could be saying, come on, stupid Spanish guy, why don't we play a6 straight away in order to go b5? Then we have a problem with the move a5. And whenever black goes b5, we can take and pass on this pawn. So this is why if you want to play b5, you have to do it slowly. By playing b6, then a6, and then b5. So b6 was played, and now bishop c3 from Nepomniachtchi. And now Magnus Carlsen went for a controversial decision. He took on d4, on d5, giving up the bishop pair, but there is a reason behind. And the thing is, of course, white takes with the bishop, and now you go a6. So Magnus gave up the bishop pair, but, you know, in return, he's very fast creating counterplay on the queen side with the move a6, because naturally you cannot go a6 in this position because of bishop takes a6, right? So bishop takes d5, bishop takes d5, now a6, bishop d2 from Nepo, queen e7. This move looks stupid at the first glance, but you see how interesting is this move, how deep is Magnus Carlsen's analysis. And you could think, okay, this move is to go queen f6 at some point, then create some pressure on f3, but it's much more than that, as you will see in few moves. So rook f1 from Nepomniachtchi, improving a little bit the pieces. Actually, you know, he wants to go king f2 and king g3, but with the rook on g1, this is actually not possible because there is a fork on h3, so this is why he goes rook f1, and now b5 from Carlsen, takes, and king f2. And from this point, Magnus starts playing a brutal chess. He starts with this pawn sacrifice c4. I mean, I was doing commentary in Spanish on Chess24 when I saw this move, and I couldn't believe it. I mean, I didn't understand the idea, but then you start thinking, and then you start realizing how dangerous is this pawn sacrifice from Magnus Carlsen. Actually, Nepo didn't take that pawn. He took on f4, which is also very controversial, right? As we said, because the bishop g7, has a good life, sadly. But what happens if white takes on c4? Then b takes c4, and what happens if white takes on c4 once again? Magnus' idea was to go, boom, f5, a second pawn sacrifice. And the thing is, not that easy for white to take this pawn, because if white takes with the g pawn, then boom, g4, a third pawn sacrifice in order to bring this queen to the action. And actually, white is losing. White has to resign in this position because queen h4 is almost unstoppable. After e takes f5 in this position, then you play e4, opening up this diagonal for this bishop. And this is actually a killing bishop. The position is extremely difficult to defend with the white pieces here. And let's say after pawn takes, queen takes, e4, all black pieces are attacking this naked king. We can see his pulse from here. Right? So, such a deep idea, this queen e7. So this is why after c4, Nepo took on f4. The engines think this is okay for white, but I would be extremely scared because now after e takes f4, this bishop is super strong. And but okay, there's only one bishop attacking this king, right? Because the queen cannot, penetrate white's position. So it doesn't look that bad for white. I mean, if white goes with the king to g2, nothing's happening, right? So rook a to d1, and another fantastic move from the world champion, yeah? I wasn't understanding that much. I mean, I was thinking, okay, so now maybe white wants to close the position with d4 and then d3, neutralizing this guy. So what's going to be our idea with the black pieces? White has full control on the a file because the bishop on d5 is controlling the a8 square. So I wasn't sure what was going to be Magnus' idea. But then suddenly he plays, boom, f5, another pawn sacrifice. Brilliant. Facundo once again solving the issue, solving the situation. The Facundo pawn. And we have Facundo twins in this game. f5. And here Nepomniachtchi collapsed. And then he took with the wrong pawn. It was necessary to take with the e pawn in this position. I know it looks extremely scary, allowing this queen to penetrate. But still the position is equal. For example, bishop d4, king g2, queen e2, king h3. And now, the engines say this is some sort of equality. Looks very dangerous for white, but you can start, chasing the queen with the rook. And this is about equal. But Nepo took with the g pawn, and now we all know how to proceed. We saw the idea. Magnus goes for another pawn sacrifice, g4. Allowing this queen to penetrate in white's position with fatal consequences for white. In the game, Nepo tried, to play d4, neutralizing this bishop on g7. And if you take on g4, then queen h4, king g2, queen g3, king h1, queen h3, king g1, and bishop d4. I just wanted to show you this variation to see how an extremely bad piece as the g7 bishop was can become like the star of the game, and can finish the game by playing bishop d4 check. And as I told you, Nepo went for d4, and now queen h4 check, king e2, queen h2, rook f2 only move, and now gf3, and here Nepomniachtchi resigned. And then there are probably some of you who are starting with chess that you could be asking yourselves, why Nepo resigned here? Well, let's try to understand. If king takes f3, then queen takes h5, and then, you know, the rook is hanging after the king moves. So this is just a rook up for black. And if the king goes to e1, which is the only available square not to get mated immediately, and where you protect the f2 rook, then after queen g1, you have two options. The first one is to go king d2, after which the rook on f2 hangs, and the second option is to go rook f1, and then queen e3 is mate. What a beautiful game. What a fantastic masterpiece from Magnus Carlsen. So I hope you guys enjoyed this game. I did it a lot by analyzing it. And I'll be bringing you more games between Nepomniachtchi and Magnus Carlsen in the following days. So big hugs from Spain. Take care. And if you drink, don't drive. Bye bye guys. Take care. Pleasure.